Hello and welcome to the Retail Podcast. And today we're joined by Sarah Engel from January Digital, live from New York. So let me bring her to the stream so she's not there listening in the green room. Hello, Sarah. How you doing? Not in the green room, but anyway.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to see you again.
Sarah, I thought rather than witter off your fantastic list of credentials, and I think a couple of ones just to tap on and why I thought it'd be wonderful to have this conversation with you right now as we go into the golden quarter. There's a lot of topical things, but it feels like if you are anyone in the conference industry and you want to keep your finger on the pulse, they phone you up and ask you to be the person to come and speak. You're on the board at the Shop Talk and Grocery Shop. You're advisor at the NRF and NXT. You're the Women in Retail Leadership Circle. And you also, while doing all of this, have grown your career from CRO to CMO to now president at January Digital. And it's phenomenal to see. And what we've tried to do on the podcast over the years is look at great leaders who are sort of empowering not only their teams and their business, but the industry. And I think your profile speaks volumes of how you're doing both things, which must be really challenging, no?
Oh, thank you. So what a kind introduction, by the way. It's a trip down memory lane. But yeah, I mean, it is such a phenomenal time in the industry. It certainly has been challenging. I mean, there are a lot of headwinds, but it's also because of those headwinds, there's so much innovation going on. It's moving so quickly. So I find that really exciting. There's, that the people that I'm surrounded with, the women that I'm able to interact with and kind of help in their next stages of their careers, like they are the ones making the changes in this industry and are moving as fast and hopefully sometimes faster than the consumer's moving. So it's a phenomenal time in the industry.
And I think change is always a great fuel for innovation. But before we get into, if you like, the day job, and I mean, I've got so much to ask you about community commerce. I've seen your post about TikTok, about what retailers should be doing in engaging the audience earlier. But I just think if we look at Sarah, the human, take away the retail element for a minute. What I'd love to do is, and luckily, fortunately, I've looked at my data from Spotify on the listenership, and we do have females almost equally represented, not only from a listenership, but also from an engagement perspective. And so the ages between 25 to roughly 45, I have parity in listenership. So I'm 25, and I think this is the advice that I'm going to ask you to give probably can go to either or, but I'm just curious if you could go back in time to sort of whisper in your ear early on in your career to accelerate your amazing career that you've got and are still building, what would that advice be?
Oh, there are a couple that I think of often. I think the biggest one, first and foremost, is that setting boundaries actually gets you farther ahead and is good for everyone involved. I think it took me a long time to realize saying, I'm not able to fly on Sunday. I will be there on Monday.
Yeah.
Hard stop, as opposed to, well, because my kids have to go to school and all these details of like, this is what I'm able to do. This is what I'm willing and able to do. Once I did that, it made me so much more powerful and focused within each moment of my life. And so I think the establishment of boundaries, I certainly wish I had figured out earlier in my 20s. You wear yourself down, you end up getting sick, you do all of these things and tie yourself in knots, and it really doesn't need to be that way. And it's not just a power differential element. It is like literally the ability to say, here are the boundaries of each element of my life. Here's how I'm going about this. I'm very clear. I know what my priorities are. It actually helps everyone around you. And I think it's sometimes seen as selfish, and it's absolutely not. It is self-protecting, but it actually serves everyone around you. Everybody's very clear on what is going to get done at each individual time in your life. And so that would be one big one. The other one is more tactical, I suppose, which is to say, if you are coming up in communications or liberal arts degree, get your finance training. That was one of those lessons in life that the moment I stepped into a boardroom, I realized that most of the people at the table, that likely I would be the only woman, and I would also be the only one who came from a marketing or communications background. The
Yeah.
moment I couldn't speak the same language in terms of finance, I was dead in the water. And so I actually personally spent my money on the side years ago, went and
Yeah.
got the finance training I needed, which helped me, of course, in every element of the business. It helped me to become a president of a company, to be able to run things from a more operational standpoint.
Yeah.
But that's always my advice to our more communications focused team members and young people that I'm involved with is make sure that you're covering every area of business. For me, that was finance.
Yeah.
Because at some point you need to be able to speak that language, you need to understand it deeply to be able to run a P&L.
Yeah. No, I love it. And just to let you know, they're actually two new points. They're one of the main themes that a lot of listeners have heard from several CEO female leaders is the fact that the voice that they had in their heads was one that they wish they hadn't had. Basically, having permission to talk is one of the things as a female leader. Later in life, that was never an issue. Early in life, it's like, do I have permission? And that's where I was saying that probably is as relevant to myself or to anyone. But it was really interesting, and I guess when people look at their careers, making sure you have that well-rounded perspective which is what you're saying. If you're going to go into leadership, you need that well-rounded.
Absolutely. But that brings a slightly different point up. But the idea of advocacy and building that, good ideas are good ideas, right? The willingness and ability to speak up. I think about reverse mentorship that I have here in our organization. Like there are so many younger people in our organization with phenomenal ideas who grew up digitally native.
Yeah.
If I'm not able to put my own background and ego to the side to learn from these team members, there's no way you're going to innovate fast enough. And so I think that's true for anybody. There are very distinctive moments career-wise where it was more literal. Like I remember being on an executive team, not here in the past, where there were 2 women in the executive team, and then there were a number of men on the executive team. And what we realized was that sometimes those ideas weren't quite heard. Somebody would say something and then somebody would say it later and then, oh, John, that was a good idea, that type of thing. We actually had a code. We literally kind of worked it out in the background. And of course, now I do it very naturally and probably have for the last 10 years. But it was like, that was a really good idea. When you brought that up earlier, could you elaborate on that? Hey, when you mentioned that earlier, so there was actually kind of a very intentional advocacy. And certainly that was in this case where we, only had 2 women on an executive team. Over time, I think that's for anybody. And I think it's even more important when you have hybrid and remote work situations.
Yeah.
It might be an introvert extrovert situation. It might be one person on the screen and everybody else in the room. So being very emotionally aware of people trying to speak, of, an idea, something somebody wants to bring up that somebody hasn't said something in a while, and making sure that you're actually bringing people into the conversation. Like very intentional advocacy helps your own team operate in a stronger way and innovate faster.
And I just want to pick up on that. You mentioned earlier about allyship and truly sort of empowering your team. What words of advice would you have for executives who potentially don't know how to be an ally, right? I think that's this word that everyone, it just mean I'm a nice person, right? Do I have to proactively do something? And what is that thing that I need to do? So as an executive, as a president who runs a business, what words of wisdom would you have?
Yeah, it's true for anybody, but I actually want to speak to your male listenership right now, because I will tell you, and I would say most women, I just did a panel recently with 2 phenomenally high-powered women in retail, and all 3 of us, as we talked about our own mentors, our own champions, almost all of them were men. So we certainly had a woman or 2, but almost all of them were men. So the power of male allies and the power of just champions for good ideas, again, male, female, good ideas, somebody being really having a lot of promise in your organization. I think the biggest thing is being very conscientious of speaking people's name when they're not in the room. The reality is you are often in a room where decisions are being made. If you're in a leadership role, you're in a room where decisions are being made. It is your responsibility to say, when somebody says, you did such a great job on that, to go, oh, Danielle actually built that. That was actually her idea. She's not in the room, right? And so it's my responsibility to say that on her behalf. And so I think of situations like that where like that is one of the strongest thing leaders can do is not just giving credit where credit is due, but like, hey, we're thinking about this new thing. We're working through this. Why don't we go ask these 3 people? Like they have really unique perspectives, right? Like and you talk about inclusion. That is an element of inclusion, like making sure that you're bringing voices into the room and to have the conversation. So I think there's more formal ways to go about it too. Mentorship is certainly powerful and important. And there are both informal structures of mentorship, which I've experienced, as well as more formal. I remember going to somebody who had a very different skill set, a senior person in our organization. And I said to him, would you be willing to mentor me? This is what I mean by that. Yeah. Well, could we meet 1 time per month? I only need 1 hour of your time. This is the type of feedback I need. I would love to give you this feedback in return. This is a mutually beneficial relationship. Like I've had very structured mentorships like that. And then I've had more informal ones. I also, sometimes it takes you years to realize that person that was really the champion for you, the ally for you, the person speaking up for you when you're not in the room. Yeah. Sometimes it's very clear. I'm negotiating this contract, and I can think of a, phenomenal male ally who I was negotiating a contract years ago. And I'm like, am I allowed to ask for this? I wasn't sure. Like, who knows the answer? And I'm like, I know who knows the answer. This guy. And just the ability and the willingness to share that information is incredibly powerful. So I think if I think of it as a continuum, yes, there's mentorship, informal and formal. There's then allyship. Like I'm going to be in a outspoken way in my organization, in my social network, on stage, say, this is what I stand for. Yeah. And then there's championship. And a lot of times that championship happens behind the scenes. It happens in a leadership meeting, an executive meeting, and a board meeting. It happens when somebody says, hey, I'd like to interview you on this subject. And you go, it's not actually my story to tell. Let me introduce you to these 3 people whose story it is to tell. Like that's the continuum to championship.
Yeah. You have to have so much, I don't know if it's high EQ, like emotional intelligence, to be able to do that, or be secure in yourself, which sometimes in some organizations, because of the toxicity or the way that it's run, is really difficult. And I just want to pick up this. This is your unconscious competence. Is the fact that you said early on, boundaries is really important to set, and especially when you go into mentorship, setting up, listening to you talk, setting those boundaries of, hey, this is what I'm looking for. And this is what I can provide, I think is probably not talked about a lot, because sometimes people feel that that's more to do with the psychology of work rather than work itself, right? In terms of setting those boundaries.
I love that point. I was going to say really fast too, there's another element of, I assume this person will see that I'm doing a good job and they'll just help me. Well, you just have to be explicit. You just have to ask. And being explicit means setting boundaries around what you're asking, because if you're asking somebody who's a board member or CEO, like they only have so much time too, and they likely are willing to help, maybe not, and you'd rather know that up front. But if they are, like setting boundaries around that, and this is exactly what I'm asking, and I would love to offer this in return, there's so much strength to that. So I love that point.
Yeah, and also having a mentor. I think a lot of people leave it way too late in their careers to have actually 2 mentors rather than 1, and in different parts of the business, because sometimes you go where it's really easy and you pick up someone who's your champion, but actually can't help you in your career. And those champions sometimes sits elsewhere. What is the one thing that retailers should be thinking about that they're not right now?
More than ever, it is the elongated season. So Prime Day, back to school, straight into holiday, early promos. We're talking a lot right now about the Cyber 12. When we're talking with our clients, it is not, it's not Black Friday, Cyber Monday. It's actually this 12-day period where very specific things happen on very specific days. When promos peak, what customers are expecting. Those expectations have shifted a lot in the last few years. And this year is really interesting. It is behaving slightly differently. Some of the patterns we're seeing the same. Holiday pulled up and up and up. So, we're starting holiday in October last year, right? So it pulled up. There's also an element though of very conscious delay of purchase. And so and by that I mean I'm planning. I'm a consumer male consumers we're seeing this even higher than female consumers, but I'm very intentionally planning to wait until the last minute. I'm very intentionally planning to wait for the next deal to come. And so I think that brands have trained their customer base on their promo cycle.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that happening. We're hold and wait. Another way, and you can see that coming out right now, is in conversions. So no matter who you talk to, and if you're in the retail industry and listening, you're not the only one. I promise your conversion path is longer. It just is. And it has been for the last 6 to 9 months. And I think everybody's going, it used to only take 3 touch points. Now it's taking 6. Now it's taking 8. And, there's a lot of panic around that. Certainly, if you're talking about a site conversion versus an in-store conversion, certainly there are things you can do to control that. Your site experience, your checkout process. If they want to shop on social, let them check out on social. So, those elements that I think people are looking at, but there's also a lot of behavior right now that is saying, I'm considering my purchases for longer. My economic confidence is a little shaken right now. I need to plan my purchases in a different way. We saw at Prime Day, people buying back to school.
Yeah.
Prime Day, we also saw people buying holiday.
Yeah.
A lot of toys purchased that were going to be held for holiday. And so that very conscientious process means that conversions are taking longer to happen. Also, you mentioned TikTok. I think it is important to point out and have the audience, so I want to say it. I believe strongly in TikTok. I believe strongly in socials, clearly in socials' ability to build a broader customer base, to reach new consumers, and to convert. It does.
Would you just sorry to interrupt you? Would you put that underneath the umbrella of community commerce, or would you say that's something else?
I would put it under the umbrella of community commerce. I think it's interesting. You look at community, and I think there are social platforms that pull more towards community, and those that pull less towards community. And I think about gosh, I actually love Pinterest. If they're listening, I do. And when I was on the brand side for quite a while, about half my career has been inside brands. And I believe strongly in Pinterest back then. It couldn't quite convert. They've put so much in place now where it does convert. And that's a very specific, again, talk about continuums. You have the continuum of your Facebook's clearly a community. Clearly you're doing meetup groups, and you have moms groups, and there's so much going on there. Instagram, TikTok is a faster pace. TikTok significantly faster pace. And then the other kind of opposite end of that spectrum is Pinterest, where it's yes, there is some community happening, but it's a very personal board. It's something I'm excited about. I'm building my wedding board. I'm building recipes for my family, whatever those elements are. And I think brands are figuring out how to monetize that differently. So yes, I would say all of those have elements of community. But it's a spectrum of your Facebooks to your Pinterests.
Yeah.
With TikTok specifically, though, I guess it's true with Pinterest as well, but I would just say, if they're coming from, you just have to think about people's mindset in that moment. In TikTok, they're in the mindset of entertainment. They're in the mindset of discovery, right? They might not be in the mindset of purchasing right this moment. And so the fact that conversion is taking longer is fine. You are building a bigger base. You have to measure it differently. I think I'm seeing a lot of I'm getting so much more social traffic. And then the question is always, is the traffic qualified? It is qualified in a different way. You're trying to build your base. You have to be able to have a recurring message and know that those conversions are going to take a bit longer because you're interrupting an entertainment path, you're interrupting a discovery path, or you're leading them from a discovery path into a conversion path. It's just a very different, I think many brands and retailers and advertisers are trying to fit everything with the same model of measurement, same model of outreach, same cadence of creative. And you really have to be able to slice and dice it in a much more granular way, understand who your customer base is and your potential customers are on each one of these platforms. When that's happening, though, it's incredibly powerful. We are seeing massive lift in that area if it is done with very specific audiences, very specific strategy, and measurement. But the toughest part, I think, sometimes is the measurement, because organizations expect to report things in a very specific way.
Well, I was just going to ask you, so if you're converting, and I'm just curious from what because I think the age-old problem has been, the e-commerce director has always competed with the stores director. And if you're lucky enough, in some organizations, it's the same person. So it doesn't matter where the sale happens. It's a sale for the company. But I'm just curious, in your because you talked about digital touch points and conversion. I guess when you look at the path to purchase, are people worried that it won't convert online, but it will convert offline? Or are people trying to tackle that in any sort of way?
I feel like we've had this conversation for like 8 years. And also, many organizations have moved forward. What you just said is exactly right. Like the concept of like omni-channel is that's our language. That's our language. Customers don't think that way. They expect you to have what they want when they want it. They expect a good brand experience no matter how they interact with you. And if you sell online and you sell in store and you sell at Sephora, they expect their experience to be perfect.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of it. And I would say, yes, most organizations have realized that they have to shift forward, that a sale is a sale is a sale, that a customer, connecting their customer base and data across retail and digital and wholesale if possible, making sure that they actually understand who that customer is. Like, I think everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Whether they've actually moved down the path to make the right structure decisions and budget decisions is a very different question, because you almost always have, still in that Monday morning meeting, what happened in retail this weekend? What happened online? Right? And as long as we keep doing that, as long as we measure things separately and don't have a more holistic view, you'll continue down this path that creates slightly fractured customer experiences. But so that is happening. The other thing I see happening is it's so interesting, where stores are doing really well right now, which makes me really happy as a retail gal. I love seeing stores succeed. I believe that store associates and store managers know so much more about your customer than they ever get credit for.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big advocate of our store associates. But because your data can only tell you so much, by the way. Call your store manager. They'll tell you what the data really means. But anyway, I think there's an element now where stores are doing really, really well over the past 6 months or so. People are very excited about that. And yet at the most senior levels, it's why isn't digital performing as well or better than in the past? Digital grew and grew and grew. So they're not seeing any element of trade-off. They want everything to rise, and everything to rise at the same pace.
Yeah.
And think about, the biggest piece of that is they plan their years that way.
Yeah.
They planned their budget last September for this year, everything rising at the same pace. Stores are rising, rising, rising. Sometimes those people are converting in store rather than digitally. And all of a sudden you've failed. All of a sudden your poor e-com person, you've failed because it's going down or staying steady and not growing at this rapid pace. They're coming into the store. And if you look at almost any organization who has their data connected, will tell you, if you have somebody shop in more than one channel, you have usually a 3-time higher lifetime value. A significant, depends on the type of product, of course, but a significantly higher lifetime value if they shop in multiple places with you. So the idea of trying to capture them only in one place and keeping them only in one place is only a short-term win. That's a win for your organizational silos. That is not a win for your company. And so I think I've seen healthy businesses, recognize that. It's hard work, though. I don't think people aren't shifting their organizations and their P&L ownership and their teams and their hiring because they don't know to. It's takes time and it's complicated. And when it comes down to it, a CEO, often now a CMO more and more, has to come in and go, here's a long-term plan. Here's how we're getting after it. Well, what we just discussed. Also, I comped this day last year. Like, they have to be reaching those short-term goals and long-term goals at the same time. And I think a lot of times the market doesn't have the patience to wait for the right kind of change to happen. And so they have to meet short-term and long-term goals at the same time. And you see a lot of turnover at the C-level for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, there's two directions. I mean, one of the things about store associates, it always perplexed me how companies would spend thousands, if not millions, trying to find social engagement out there where their biggest advocates who probably know and are fantastic customers are their own workforce, especially for some of the younger brands where, you have to be hip and cool to work there. And I'm sure they're TikTok accounts. But anyway, that's one thing. I'm curious, the intersection of, it's like conversational commerce, I don't know what you want, social commerce, whatever it's called. How is that growing? Obviously in China, it dominates. That is, and everyone's seeing the TikTok house where literally every room in that TikTok house is a social seller. selling something via that. How far away are we from that, do you think, in the US specifically?
I think it is growing quickly. And the biggest thing I will point to is where a consumer's entire journey happens. A couple years ago, we had the data come out that was like, oh, wait a minute. They didn't go to Google. They went into Amazon, searched on Amazon, checked on Amazon, got out. That is now happening in social significantly at higher rates than it did in the past. So if I literally just look at it from a transactional standpoint, and they're coming in, they're actually using TikTok for discovery, they're using it to actually get through the process to find a brand to go and transact. They're coming in through that channel, converting through that channel, or converting from there to the site. That is when things really start to change, because when you can monetize it, companies will lean into it, right? And this is an interesting one where the consumers are leading the way, which I love.
Yeah.
Technology, I will give the tech folks credit, right? Technology had to lead the way first. It just wasn't there. Now that it is there, almost there, to be able to genuinely be able to convert and buy the product that you want, that you just saw, this content creator promote, and you want to buy it right now, and you're super interested, and you want it to deliver tomorrow, the more that experience becomes frictionless, the more the consumer wins, because they're telling us they want
product discovery, shopping as entertainment.
Yes.
That's for me why I like yourself, a massive TikTok advocate. Because
you have to talk to Deborah Weinswig. She's the founder of Courtside Research. I feel like she's such a soothsayer. She told me 3 years ago, here's what's happening in China, here's what's going to happen in the US. Yeah. You can almost to the month count on her predictions. So there's my advocacy mention of the day. Gotta go talk to Deb.
One of the things that you mentioned, I just want to go back in terms of the conversion and what you were telling retailers. Like I said, what's the one thing that retailers should know that they don't know, and what should they be focusing on? What is the guidance that you're giving them? What's the outcome of that? Your social strategy should be better than it is. What is it?
The biggest piece I would say, and I would have said it in the second quarter, but it's still true now, and it's definitely true for 24 planning, you have to be testing like 20% of your budget, constantly testing new things. Having, much love for Google and Meta, having all your eggs in that basket is not going to create monumentally different outcomes.
Yeah.
So I think that element, it is not, just your social strategy is better. Structured testing. You need testing infrastructure in place, the big enough budget to actually be able to measure it, with the understanding internally. These are the exact things we're testing at any given time. We're going to test in, we're going to budget into winners. And be comfortable with failure. You think about it, I worked with data folks for a long time, and it's either right or wrong. And they were perfectly comfortable with that. With marketers, we're like, it was all good. There's always a good outcome. But what you learn from that, structured testing within your marketing program, structured testing within your community building. When you do that, you can iterate so much faster. You get into the fourth quarter when prices are going to go up and up and up.
Yeah.
And your budget's not going to go as far. And if all your eggs are in 2 baskets, it's very, very hard to meet your goals. And so the folks that I have seen, they were the most successful last holiday season. I see so much progression. So many of the brands that we work with have spent the first half of the year testing into new means, determining what's going to work for them, determining how they can get to new customers, so that when they get into fourth quarter, they actually have levers to pull. Because so many brands, the only levers they have to pull, go deeper, discount, which is not a winning proposition long term, or just pour more and more money into the same 2 channels. And that is just, there's a diminishing returns there. So I think the answer is actually structured testing, which is not a super exciting answer, but it is what people need to do in order to get themselves ready for those moments when they have to be able to pull levers.
Yeah, and it feels like, I know you mentioned the Meta thing, but I actually read this on I think it was in one of your pieces of literature about how Thread, and I didn't know, I sort of know this, but I didn't sort of put 2 and 2 together. Thread's tagged to Instagram. So should you ever have a fallout with Thread, you actually have to delete your Instagram account, which is petrifying for any brand that you've spent 5 years building it, and something may go haywire and you can't actually disconnect one from the other.
It has been interesting to watch how quickly, how excited everyone was, and how quickly that excitement kind of calmed down. We do that a lot in the industry, which, we all love something new, and we love the aspect of competition. But yes, within probably 24 to 48 hours of that announcement, when you really dug through all the details, you're like, wait a minute. When I set up Threads, it's attached to my actual Instagram account, including for companies' accounts.
Yeah.
And deleting one deletes the other. So they've said that they're working on a solution that would avoid that, but I have not seen it come yet.
What is the sentiment in the retail industry? How are you finding people's perspective for next year?
It's interesting. I think the first part of this year, there was more doom and gloom than there is right now. I think this industry has become so resilient over the last few years, like early COVID, shutting all our stores. I mean, I was on the brand side at the time, right? Like people going on furlough and you're trying to make sure that you're, at one point FedEx stopped picking up and people couldn't get packages out of their warehouses. Like if you made it through that and you're in this industry, like you are made of iron at this point. And so I think that we as an industry are weathering those storms a lot better. One of the biggest things I would say though, is that there is a big sentiment right now of doing more with less.
Yep.
I think if I had to like summarize, people's
That was the one catchphrase. Do more with
yes. Yeah, it's not pessimism. It's not fear. I think, like I said, if you've been in this industry for a while, like nothing can scare you now, right?
Yeah.
Fearless. But there is this element, and almost anybody I talk to, again, whether it's CEO, CMO, e-com manager, whoever it is, it's, can you do more with less staff? Can you do more with less resources? We're going to keep the budget exactly the same, but we need it to grow 40%.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on.
To offset inflation, right? Somehow.
Yeah. I think some of it is that. I think some of it is that because we believed that consumers were demanding it, because of fear at the time, organizations invested so much during COVID on everything they thought their customer might possibly want. Next day delivery, same day delivery, curbside pickup, curated dressing rooms before you walk in the door, service after service after service. Every one of those chips away at margin. Some of them are vital for your organization, some are not. And so I think a lot of times brands chase their competitors down the path, or they believed, they read something in the media and they believed we have to go down this path, or somebody on their board said, why aren't we doing this yet? Have to run down this path. And so now we got to the first part of this year, and I still see a lot of that happening where it's like, which of these things are the most important to our customer base? Does my customer actually want this to arrive today? Is that the most important thing? And should I be spending $40, a margin on that? Yeah. Or is it more important that they have these other services, that they have exclusive access to product first, or other things that are important to them? So I think there's a lot of trade-off conversations happening. There's a lot of upskilling staff, reskilling staff from a digital and data perspective, a lot of that happening. But all of it can kind of fall under this umbrella of like, it's not pessimism, it's almost realism. And here's the reality, the finite resources, finite staffing. How can we reach more people, get more people into our customer base, grow our business with finite resources?
I'm just curious, in terms of your final thought, maybe reflecting on the earlier part of our conversation and the words of wisdom that you had, what would be your final thoughts or words of wisdom for anyone listening to the show?
I love that. I think there are two things I have in mind. One is there are elements in any organization, any role, any industry that where there is a need that can be served, lean in, say yes, step up, whether you know how to do it or not, like just say yes. I think leaning into new elements in your career, like there is no linear path. So if you're sitting there thinking, I have to do these 3 things and then I'll get to this next level, and it just doesn't exist. If you ask anybody who's been doing this for a couple of decades, as I have, they will say it is not a linear path. And so the more you can take in new experiences, ask people for advice, like really volunteer and put yourself out there. Sharonda Williamson, who is from Ralph Lauren, who is absolutely brilliant, and you should definitely go follow her on LinkedIn, said that to me at one point, that some of the biggest career shifts that she had was somebody saying, nobody wants to do this job. Will you do it? And her saying, absolutely. So that is one element. The only other element is, I would say, there's so many ways in which you can connect with other people who can help in your career and who you can offer help to. So whether you do that informally, through your social networks, through LinkedIn, through, the people in your organization, or whether you do that more formally. We're about to have Shop Talk Meetup for Women. It's a virtual event. And we did that very intentionally to get that many more women who are able to speak and lead these table talks, these intimate sessions to answer questions. I'm going to be talking about navigating really tough challenges inside your organization. And we're going to tell some truths. So those types of opportunities, like lean into those, sign up, go have those conversations. Like it's not just about like advocating for yourself in your career, which is also vital. It's also volunteer, jump in. If you see a need, fill the void. And I guarantee you will learn something from that. And it often will help you determine what that next step should be for you.
Yeah, I don't often say this, but I genuinely feel, Sarah, some of those words of wisdom will change people's lives in a really positive way. So thank you. Thank you for
reach out
sharing
to anybody who listens and just needs advice or would like to connect. I'm so glad to talk to you, Alex. You do phenomenal things for this industry, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you at Shop Talk next year. Thanks.